I still remember the way the fluorescent lights flickered above us, casting an unflattering glare on the cafeteria tables where our fates were sealed. It was supposed to be just another Wednesday in senior year, the last few months of freedom before we were thrust into the chaotic world of adulthood. But that day, they decided it would be fun to play a twisted game. You've heard of Survivor. Well, they turned our high school into a real-life version, but this wasn't some reality show where you can just walk away at the end. My name is Mia, and I was one of the unsuspecting players caught in a cruel game orchestrated by the very people I thought were my friends. The ringleader, a girl named Ashley, was your typical queen bee, gorgeous, charming, but with a dark underbelly that few dared to confront. Then there was Rachel, my once best friend, who followed Ashley like a shadow, her loyalty forever bound to the girl who wore popularity like a crown. I thought we were inseparable, the three of us, a trio that could weather any high school storm. That day, I arrived at the cafeteria with my heart racing, not from nerves but from the usual excitement of lunch with my friends. But when I spotted them at the center table, laughter bubbling between them like a cruel joke, I knew something was off. It was the glint in Ashley's eye, the one that promised a game I would have no interest in playing, yet here I was, standing at the edge, unable to turn away. The whispers began to swirl, igniting a wildfire of rumors I never imagined could consume me. Eliminate was the word they tossed around like it was some harmless game, but as I stood there, watching my so-called friends weave a narrative that would soon become my nightmare, I felt the ground shift beneath me. It was a typical high school move, the sort you see in movies. One moment you're in a group hug, and the next, you're staring down the barrel of social exile. I can still hear the laughter echoing in my mind, a haunting melody that taunted me while they picked off those who dared to stand in their way. I was the target, the unsuspecting lamb chosen for the slaughter, and it felt as if my heart had been ripped from my chest. The betrayal ignited a fire within me, hot and consuming, a fire that would not be extinguished until I had my revenge. They thought they were clever, but I was about to show them that you don't play with someone like me and expect to walk away unscathed. This was more than just a game, this was a war, and I was done being the victim. I was ready to reclaim my story, and when the smoke cleared, they would wish they had never underestimated me. As the weeks passed, the game didn't just unfold, it escalated into a brutal spectacle. It was like staring into the abyss of high school hell, where betrayal painted every wall, and trust lay shattered underfoot like broken glass. Each day felt heavier than the last, a thick fog of anxiety clouding my mind as I walked the halls. The whispers echoed louder, laughter rang hollow as it pierced my very being. Ashley and Rachel became masters of manipulation, wielding their influence like weapons. They turned friends into foes, creating a ripple effect that snaked through the school and engulfed anyone who dared to stand by my side. It was a clear message: choose your side wisely. Those who had once smiled at me in the hallways wore masks of fear instead, unwilling to risk their social standing for a girl they once called a friend. I became the social pariah, the punchline of their cruel game. But it wasn't just the isolation that hurt, it was the betrayal from the one person I would have trusted with my secrets, Rachel. My heart ached as I watched her swivel between tables, laughing at my expense, her allegiance torn without a second thought. It was as if the years of friendship we had shared, sleepovers filled with secrets, the late night phone calls, the shared dreams, had evaporated into thin air. Each cruel jab they threw at me cut deeper as I saw her eyes light up with laughter, her loyalty exchanged for a fleeting moment of popularity. One day, while scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon the ultimate betrayal, a video posted by Ashley, featuring a group of students gathered around a table in the park. They were all laughing, their eyes glittering with malicious joy, and there I was, the latest victim of their so-called eliminations. The caption read, "Guess who's next on the chopping block? #eliminate Mia." It felt like a dagger through my heart, twisting painfully as I realized how far they were willing to go to make me the target of their sick game. The justification for their actions was absurd: pretending it was all in good fun, a social experiment, they called it. But I knew better, this wasn't fun. It was a systematic dismantling of my spirit, an artful dissection of everything I had built during those fragile teenage years. With every laugh, every whisper, they stripped away my dignity, leaving me exposed, fragile, and aching for reprisal. The anger swelled within me, igniting a need that clawed at my insides. I was no longer just the girl they targeted, I was a volcano ready to erupt. The thought of revenge became an obsession, a balm for the wounds they had inflicted. I began to plot, gathering the pieces of my plan while the world continued to see me as the victim. I would show them that I was not someone to be toyed with. I started by quietly gathering intel, documenting their every move, their weaknesses, the things they were most afraid of. I watched as Ashley reveled in her power, her facade of invincibility masking the cracks beneath. And Rachel, the once warm-hearted friend who had abandoned me for the allure of popularity, began to falter too. I could see the strain in her eyes, the guilt lurking just beneath the surface, and I knew I could exploit that. With calculated precision, I began to spread whispers of my own, subtle enough to seem spontaneous, but pointed enough to shift the tide. Did you hear what Rachel said about you? Ashley's not all she seems. The seeds of doubt slowly took root, bloomed as the once group of friends began to splinter. The tension within their circle became palpable, the cracks widening with every passing day. I watched with a mix of satisfaction and sorrow as the two girls, who once reveled in their cruelty, began to turn on each other. My heart raced at the sight of Ashley's confidence wavering, her glare sharp enough to cut glass when Rachel dared to question her authority. One afternoon, while I sat alone in the library, I overheard Rachel confiding in another girl, her voice tinged with regret. "I didn't want it to go this far, you know. I thought it was just a joke." I hushed my breath, trying to stay unnoticed as I clutched my notebook tightly, a million thoughts swirling in my head. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the chink in their armor. I decided to plant a seed of discord that would blossom into chaos. The next morning, I compiled a series of screenshots from previous group chats, messages that exposed their plans to eliminate me, their laughter dripping with malice. I sent them anonymously to the students who had once idolized Ashley and Rachel, the ones who surrounded them like loyal subjects. I watched intently as the whispers began to take root, spreading like wildfire through the halls. The laughter that once echoed around them transformed into murmurs of concern, growing louder as the days went on. Ashley soon found herself on the defensive, her royal demeanor cracking under the weight of scrutiny. "Mia's just jealous," I heard her claim in a desperate attempt to regain her throne as the queen bee. But no one was buying it anymore. I could see her strutting down the hallway, her confidence faltering with every passing glance that suggested disbelief. The thrill of watching her unravel was intoxicating, but it came with a heavy heart. I had once loved that girl like a sister. But my revenge didn't end there. I started to expose more than just their cruel games. I tapped into the secrets I had carefully collected, Rachel's anxiety about her grades, Ashley's hidden fear of being unmasked as a fraud when it came to her beauty and charm. I spread rumors that hinted at the cracks in their carefully constructed facades, embellishing the truth just enough to make it sting. "Did you hear about Rachel? I heard she's failing math. I'm pretty sure Ashley is going to drop her the moment her GPA slips." The tables had turned, and suddenly, Rachel was the one getting snubbed in the halls, her old friends whispering behind her back, unsure if it was safe to associate with her. The look of confusion in her eyes as she searched for answers turned the knife deeper, and I struggled with a guilt that threatened to invade my triumph. "Why are you doing this, Mia?" Rachel confronted me one day as we crossed paths in the parking lot. "I thought we were friends?" Her voice trembled, and I could see the hurt reflected in her eyes, yet I stood firm. "You chose your side, Rachel. You decided that I was nothing more than a game to be played. I'm just returning the favor." The air between us crackled with tension as I turned to walk away, the weight of her betrayal crashing down on me like a wave. But the moment I stepped away, I felt a surge of power rush through me. This was no longer just about retribution. I was reclaiming my narrative, my identity, and it was exhilarating. But as the days turned into weeks, the situation spiraled even further out. It began with an unnerving feeling one evening as I sat in my bedroom, shadows lengthening across the walls. I was scrolling through social media when I stumbled upon a picture Ashley had posted. In it, she was surrounded by the remnants of her kingdom, smiling friends, laughter frozen in time, their eyes glinting with their shared cruelty. I couldn't shake off the sense of violation that washed over me. How could they mock me so openly, having turned our bond into a public spectacle? But what struck me the most wasn't the betrayal, it was the realization that Ashley was losing her grip. The comments beneath her photo, once filled with adoration, were now peppered with uncertainty. Isn't this a little mean? Mia really didn't deserve this. It was like watching a slow-motion train wreck, and I reveled in the bittersweet joy of witnessing their downfall. That night, I felt the scars of emotional pain morph into something sharper, more visceral, a relentless craving for vindication. I replayed the moments when I had been the punchline, the victim of their twisted humor. With every flashback, the embers of anger ignited into a raging fire of determination. I could either let their actions define me, or I could rise from the ashes like a phoenix, wielding my pain as a weapon. My resolve crystallized in that moment. I wasn't just going to sit back and watch as they tore me apart, I was going to make them feel the weight of their actions. I was going to show them that I was more than a mere target, I was a force to be reckoned with. The thrill of revenge surged through my veins, electrifying me as I began to carve out my plan, one that would draw them into a trap of their making. The next day, I made my move. I approached a few trusted classmates, those who had been sidelined in Ashley's cutthroat game, and hinted at a gathering, a party at my place to reconnect in a stress-free environment. It was a ruse, a way to lure Ashley and Rachel into a situation where their guard would be down. I wanted them to feel safe, to think they could laugh and mock without consequences. The night of the gathering, I made sure everything was perfectly orchestrated. I lit candles in my dimly lit living room, played soft music in the background, and created an atmosphere that dripped with nostalgia. As friends trickled in, I greeted them with warm smiles, hiding the storm, brewing beneath the surface. I could feel the anticipation buzzing in the air, and it thrilled me. As I watched the door open and Ashley walk in, her confidence radiating as she greeted the room, a wave of satisfaction washed over me. She was about to step into the trap that I had laid for her. Rachel followed closely behind, her eyes darting nervously around the room, still clinging to the remnants of her old self, the girl who had once been my best friend. As the night wore on, laughter enveloped us like a warm blanket, but beneath it, tension simmered, waiting to explode. I had orchestrated a series of games, innocent enough on the surface, but heavily laced with covert references that would reveal the truth about their actions. "Let's play truth or dare," I suggested, a sly grin spreading across my face. The first few rounds were light-hearted, filled with silly dares and innocent questions. But then I turned to Ashley, my gaze unwavering. "Truth or dare?" "Dare," she said, probably thinking she could handle whatever came her way. The room quieted, and a smirk curled on my lips. "I dare you to tell us a secret that no one knows about you," I said, my voice dripping with sweetness. Her eyes narrowed slightly, the confidence cracking just a bit. "Fine. I'll go first," she said, her tone defensive. "I keep my grades up not just because I study hard, but because I pay someone to take my tests." A wave of surprise washed over the room, some students gasped, while others giggled nervously. But I could see the glint of panic in Ashley's eyes. She had unknowingly fired the first shot in a battle no one saw coming. With the momentum swinging, I continued to guide the game. "Rachel, your turn. Truth or dare?" She hesitated, glancing at Ashley for support. "Truth," She finally decided, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tell us why you really decided to side with Ashley," I prompted, pushing deeper. The room held its breath, the energy thickening with anticipation. Rachel fidgeted, her face shifting from defiance to vulnerability. "I thought if I stayed close to Ashley, I'd be safe. That I wouldn't be the next target." Her admission rang out, slicing through the remnants of her bravado. Whispers flitted through the crowd, and I could see realization dawning on a few faces. Rachel, too, was a victim of the queen bee's reign of terror. As the game progressed, I made sure to intertwine personal truths that turned the air electric. I threw in dares that forced them to confront the very pain they had inflicted upon me. When one student had the audacity to cry out, "Dare Ashley to say something nice about Mia," I seized the moment. "Great idea." Ashley's face fell, the audacity of the suggestion hitting her like a brick. But she was cornered, and I watched as she forced a smile. "Mia. She exists." The laughter around the room was hollow, but it was a calculated jab that cut deep. I could see the discomfort ripple across her face, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. But it was quickly extinguished by the thrill of the moment. The evening reached a crescendo when I introduced the ultimate game changer, an open mic session for confessions. Let's all share one confession from our time in high school. It can be funny, embarrassing, or revealing. Everyone shifted nervously, eyes darting, but I could see the mounting pressure. They had tossed me into the pit of public humiliation, it was time to turn the tables. One after another, students shared their secrets. Laughter rang out, but with each confession, I could feel the weight of Ashley's defiance crumbling. Finally, I stood up, my heart pounding. "I'll go," I said, injecting enthusiasm into my voice. "I confess that I was once proud to call Ashley my friend, but I no longer recognize her. The girl I knew would never hide behind a group to tear others down. She's lost herself in this cruel game of elimination." I paused, letting the words sink in. "And Rachel, I know you thought you were doing what was best for you, but you sold out our friendship for a taste of popularity. You threw me to the wolves without a second thought." Gasps surged through the crowd, and at that moment, I saw their eyes turn from me to the duo who had orchestrated my downfall. The laughter quickly transformed the silence that ensued was thick and suffocating, like a tidal wave that crashed upon the shore, leaving behind the wreckage of what once was. I felt the eyes of my peers, once my friends, now uncertain witnesses to the unraveling of two people who had thought their power was unassailable. I stood there, my heart racing, the weight of my confession heavy yet liberating, my voice echoing through the tension. Ashley's face was an amalgam of shock and fury, her mask slipping as the realization set in that the very game she had orchestrated was now backfiring spectacularly. "How dare you," she spat, her voice rising to a shrill pitch, and it was like watching the queen bee lose her throne, her crown toppling into the dirt. "I dare you to tell them why you really started this game, Ashley." I pressed, the room buzzing with anticipation. I could feel the energy shifting, the collective breath of my classmates hanging in the air like a fragile thread. For a moment, she hesitated, caught between her pride and the pressure of the crowd. But Rachel, seemingly freed by my courage, piped up, "You started this because you were afraid. You were afraid of being forgotten, of not being the center of attention." Her voice cracked with emotion, and the power dynamics shifted once more, her own vulnerability cutting through the facade Ashley had built. "Shut up, Rachel. You don't even know what you're talking about." Ashley shot back, her gaze flicking nervously from Rachel to me, and then over the sea of judgmental faces that now surrounded her. I could see the facade straining, the cracks widening as the pressure built. But I wasn't done yet. "Oh, but I do know, Ashley. I know that you're terrified of being seen as human, flawed. But guess what? We all are, and hiding behind a throne built on the misery of others doesn't make you a queen, it makes you a tyrant." The words dripped with a bittersweet satisfaction, and I reveled in the truth spilling forth, freeing me from the chains of their mockery. The room erupted in murmurs, some students nodding in agreement while others watched with wide eyes, hungry for more. I know the truth hurts, but this is what happens when you make others your scapegoats, I continued, my voice unwavering. You think it's funny to humiliate someone, but it isn't. It's cruel, and guess what? The world isn't going to treat you kindly when you play God. As I stood there, a rush of adrenaline coursed through my veins. I could feel the power shifting, the tides turning. I could see the way the other students began to subtly distance themselves from Ashley. The whispers had morphed from doubts about me, the exiled one, to questioning Ashley's integrity. Did you hear how she's bullied Mia? One whispered. Maybe she doesn't deserve to be so high and mighty, murmured another. Ashley's expression morphed from rage to panic, and I could sense her desperation. You think this is going to change anything? You think you've won? I'm still popular, and everyone will forget about you, Mia. She shot back, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. The facade was crumbling, she no longer exuded the confidence she once had. Is this really what you want to be remembered for? I asked, letting the question hang in the air. Is popularity worth losing your humanity? At that moment the days following that explosive night felt surreal, like waking up from a fever dream. The laughter and whispers echoed in my mind, but now they were different, charged with a newfound power. I could hardly believe how quickly the tides had turned. I had successfully exposed the cruel reign of Ashley and Rachel, and in the process, I had reclaimed my identity. Yet, the aftermath brought with it a storm of emotions I hadn't anticipated. In the days that followed, the atmosphere at school shifted dramatically. Ashley, once the untouchable queen bee, became the subject of hushed conversations and pointed glances. Her carefully constructed facade cracked under the pressure, and I could see the cracks in her confidence widen as she struggled to regain her footing. It was as though the very foundation of her popularity had been shaken loose, and I watched as the stragglers, the friends who had once rallied around her like loyal subjects, began to drift away. They whispered about how Ashley had crossed the line, how I had been treated unfairly, and how they couldn't support someone who thrived on cruelty. Rachel, on the other hand, was something of a tragic figure. She had fallen from grace, her betrayal overshadowed by the fallout of Ashley's unraveling. The very friends who had once adored her began to distance themselves, unsure of where they stood between the two of us. I saw her in the halls, her eyes cast down, a haunting reminder of the bond we had once shared. The guilt I had tried to bury resurfaced, clawing at my conscience. Had I truly wanted this for her? As the days unfolded, I was met with sympathy from unexpected places. Fellow students I had never spoken to before approached me, sharing their own stories of hurt and betrayal. We formed an unspoken alliance of sorts, united by the scars of high school politics. These new connections felt like a balm to the wounds I had carried for so long. But it also left me feeling conflicted. Hadn't I orchestrated this chaos, begun this war? I couldn't escape the nagging guilt that crept in late at night. Was revenge worth it? Had I become the very monster I had sought to destroy? Each time I caught a glimpse of Ashley or Rachel, their expressions mirroring confusion, regret, and even pain, a wave of remorse washed over me. I had wanted them to feel what I felt, but did they deserve this kind of suffering? One afternoon, I found myself in the library, lost in thought, when I overheard a group of students talking about what had transpired. They were dissecting the fallout with a mixture of intrigue and sympathy. It's crazy how quickly things can change, one girl said. Just one night, and now Ashley's the one on the outside looking in. I couldn't help but feel a pang of satisfaction at her words, but then it hit me, a chilling realization. What if one day, I am the one isolated? I thought. What if the darkness I had embraced became my only companion? The following weeks became a mix of triumph and introspection. I began to navigate my new reality cautiously, aware that while I had gained strength, I had also lost something precious in the process. I had shifted from being a victim to a warrior, but at what cost? Then came the day of the school assembly, where a discussion on bullying and social responsibility was on the agenda. I sat in my seat, heart racing, as the principal took the stage. "Today, we address an issue that affects many of us," he said, his voice steady. "We need to acknowledge that,